Part 2. Art and the Everyday. 1. The Window, 1911. It's a strange thing looking out of the window, bored, staring, your eyes coming in and out of focus, not really seeing what is right in front of you, your imagination taking you within to images that only existed in your mind, then to be brought sharply back to reality by a falling from the sky and landing on the ground with a hollow thump. I will never forget that moment when the real world turned into a play or a movie. The window framed like an arch of the stage or a screen. My little stool, front row seat. I was 10 and sitting at the repair window that faced it onto the dusty alley just around the corner from the main thoroughfare. I was bored as any 10-year-old would be sitting on an old stool listening to his father hammering away at some pair of shoes that looked just like the last pair. And then a man fell from the sky. He fell in front of me on the other side of the alley. He fell in such a way that I didn't see where he had fallen from, but was able to see him land. See, his body bounced. The dust rised up in the cloud. Here a dump, higher dump than you ever thought, I will say. I was the only witness that moment. I sat very still, and I was unsure if I should do anything. Before I could call out, there was a scream from above somewhere, and then 3 men came running. They were one another. They all came from different directions, all dressed quite differently. I recognized one, Mr. Ryan, the baker. The other 2, I have no idea. One looked like someone might have worked at the mill. The other well-dressed businessman of some kind. "Get the police! Call the doctor!" The scream from above asked it. "Is he dead?" It belonged to a woman. She was panicking. I watched it all, fascinated. They wanted the police, that made sense. But a doctor? Did that mean the man wasn't dead? Play unfolding before me was giving me the details, but not with the straightforward fashion I was hooked at. "What's going on, Joseph?" I had clearly been so distracted I hadn't noticed my father came up beside me. I didn't have time to answer. He immediately turned on his heel, and soon he had joined the show. He wasn't the only one. A large crowd had gathered of men and women, and even children. They weren't blocking the body now. I could only see the people, the backs of the heads, worried profiles, different expressions on faces. In this moment, I realized that while each of us is an individual with our own unique life and story, in some ways, everyone was also a type, just as I, as a grown man, am now seen as a particular type. In my case, a leader, a former thinker, someone who faces challenges head-on and walks right into the path of danger. So to that day were there those types were worried, those who were scared, those who were trying not to smile at the thrill, horror. There were those who helped it, those who were stayed back, and those who wanted to look like they were helping but really just paced it a little, doing nothing. I may not remember what each person looked like now, the shape of their nose, the color of their hair, but I know I could still accurately paint a portrait of that moment. Some details just aren't as important as others. The cops didn't arrive for half an hour. Our neighborhood did have a local beat cop, Officer Walsh, but he preferred the pump to the pavement. I'm sure someone ran to get him, but he didn't show up until just after the 2 others from the local youth center. Crowds scattered like pigeons. What I mean is they move away, but not too far away. My father stayed to the side, hands in his pocket, looking at the body thoughtfully. Blazed up, and then, though I didn't know what he was looking at, I could have opened the window, peered out, and up to see that I wasn't really invested in my theater, and what edges of my window kept on the frame. I didn't understand the concept of framing a shot then, but clearly I have a natural instinct. 2 women, sisters, both short and squat, one in the hat with a limp feather, trying to look important and failing, flopping to the side, have floated closer to me, and I could hear some of their conversation now. "Did he jump? Martha thinks he was pushed it." "No!" "Well, Martha thinks the craziest things. I won't put much stock in it. Sometimes the crazy things are the right things." True enough. They nodded together in unison, like they haven't covered the truth of the situation. But it's all guesses. They weren't wrong, though. I've seen enough wild things in my short time of this planet to know they weren't the exceptions to the rule. I seen two men come to the shop, each missing a leg, and buy a pair of shoes to share between them. There was Linda Wilson, who wandered up and down the street singing to herself and to others like she lived in an opera. I seen my own father pretend the elves made his shoes for him. People did things that seemed straight out the story all the time. Do you know him? Asked a small, older man who sauntered up to the ladies. I think it's the old Tom Miller's boy, replied the one closest to him. But I bet he tripped over his own shoes, said the man, lighting his pipe. What was he doing on the roof in the first place? Asked the other woman. They all looked it up to where I couldn't see, twirling their heads back, shielding their eyes from the... It was then that the ambulance drove up, kicking up even more dust and making everyone turn their faces away. The driver in the open-air front cabinet lifted to the ground almost before the vehicle had stopped it. The man in the back flew out of the rear doors, extending the stretcher from the base of the truck. I was fascinated by the whole thing. It was a new ambulance made by the Ford. It was basically like a Model T, but a bit longer and wide all over. What you mean to understand is that back in 1911, most folks still have the horses and buggies. The old ambulances were horse-drawn too. Sure, some people were buying cars, but it was still hardly a norm, especially in my neighborhood. So seeing a Ford ambulance was almost as thrilling as seeing a man fall from the sky. It wasn't until the man was on the stretcher I knew for certain he wasn't dead. I saw his hand move a little, and then he was put into the truck and driven off so quickly. It was almost like the medics hadn't been there. The police at that point started telling folks to clear away, but I was so sure why. Everything was over. No one wanted to stay anyway. Father did though, since he worked right here. He didn't seem to hurry off. He just stood there, looking after the ambulance and then up again. I watched him closely, and I remember how strange it seemed that the whole experience had been played outside the window and show being put on just for me. It was easy to view strangers a little more than characters made up for my entertainment. My father, though, was a real person. I knew that deep down, but in this moment I saw him not as the son looking at his father, but the viewer looking at the fictional character. I saw a man, thin and tall, worn with age and work, dusty like a street itself, with a light hunch for ears, bending over shoe after shoe. He didn't look like a hero. He was an obolo. No, I didn't think that the word at the time. I didn't have the language for it. The story was over, and we were watching a moment after the fact. His character was of the everyday man, but even less than that, he was a symbol of something small. The man in the crowd, just the other person that made up a large whole, confused. Had no answers, just excited to fill up the space. Eventually, my father turned and made his way back into the store. When I saw him, I closed my feelings and stayed the same. Yeah, he had changed somehow to me. It isn't interesting that a person can so easily be turned into a type. And it isn't useful to know that, to draw from that, to crave knowing that. I told the folks that his whole experience was the very first time I saw my first play. The very first time I understood how drawn I was so entertainment, the performance, the illusion of reality in front of me. Even if it wasn't, in this case, an illusion, it isn't interesting that the window can be like a frame in a movie, the arch of a stage. And it isn't important to know that all life is, really, in the end, one big show.